Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the ultimate ancient cold case of a totally vanished world. We're talking about a society that didn't just rival ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, but in a lot of ways actually surpassed them. And then, they just completely disappeared. Let's dig in and see exactly what happened. So, where did 5 million people go? It's a question that's literally baffled historians and archaeologists for decades. Think about it. How does an incredibly advanced, highly structured society of this magnitude, one that thrived for thousands of years, just vanish without a single trace? We are not talking about some tiny village slowly fading away here. We are talking about millions of citizens. Poof, gone. To put that into perspective for you, at its absolute peak, this civilization held 10% of the entire Earth's population. That means 1 in every 10 humans alive on the planet at that time lived within this society. It's wild to think about, and it makes their sudden vanishing act one of history's absolute greatest, most haunting puzzles. Section 1. Discovery of a lost world. You know, for centuries, this sprawling empire was just completely forgotten. It was literally buried beneath the dust of the Indian subcontinent until a series of really stunning revelations finally brought it back to light. The timeline of how we actually found them is pretty wild. It all starts way back in 1829 with a deserting British soldier who was in disguise, just stumbling upon these ruins at Harappa. But it wasn't really until the 1920s that Indian and British archaeologists started excavating and truly realized what they had found, officially announcing it to the globe in 1924. And get this, modern dating techniques in 2016 pushed the origins of these settlements all the way back to 7,000 BC. That makes the civilization far, far older than Egypt or Mesopotamia. Crazy, right? All right, moving to Section 2, an ancient urban utopia. Because as archaeologists dug deeper into this mystery, they ended up uncovering over 1,400 distinct sites. And the urban planning they found, frankly, it rivals some of our modern cities today. I want you to imagine a Bronze Age society way back in 2600 BC building multi-story houses. And they were using perfectly standardized bricks. I'm talking homes with actual indoor plumbing, indoor toilets, and super advanced street drainage. They even had public dust bins and flood-proofed their cities with massive reservoirs. And if that isn't mind-blowing enough for you, a 2006 discovery showed evidence that they even had practicing dentists taking care of people's oral health. Though, let's be real, in 7000 BC, you definitely have to tough it out without the Novocaine. These cities were meticulously zoned, basically following a strict master blueprint. You had what's called the Upper Mount, which was this fortified western citadel meant for public gatherings, marketplaces, and workshops. And then right below that was the Lower Mount, which was strictly the residential living area. Now, both of these areas were protected by really thick boundary walls. But here's the kicker. They weren't built to keep out human invaders. They were built entirely to protect the city from unpredictable river floods and wild animals. But the absolute crown jewel of their major city, Mohenjo-daro, had to be the Great Bath. Guys, this wasn't just some simple puddle. It was a massive 900-square-foot, multi-storied pool running about 2.4 meters deep. It was actually waterproofed using natural tar and was constantly supplied with fresh well water. It really was a total masterclass in ancient engineering and public hygiene. Which brings us to Section 3. The undeciphered language. You see, despite leaving behind all this incredible infrastructure, the people themselves remain a total ghost story to us. Why? Well, simply because we literally cannot read their writing. Their writing system is completely unique. We mostly find it carved onto tiny stone seals just a few centimeters wide, often right next to this mysterious unicorn-like animal figure. The script features over 400 distinct signs, and they wrote it completely cramped from right to left. Because there are so many unique signs, experts believe it's a logosyllabic script. That's just a fancy way of saying the symbols represent both entire words and specific individual sounds. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth haven't we cracked it yet? Well, if you look at Egyptian hieroglyphs, those were unlocked for us because we found the Rosetta Stone, a massive dual-language tablet that basically acted like an ancient Google Translate. But the Indus script, it remains a locked door because no translation key or bilingual phablet has ever been discovered. It is literally like being handed a book in a language you didn't even know existed with absolutely zero translation available. We do have one incredibly fascinating clue, though. We know for sure they traded widely because Indus symbols have popped up in Mesopotamian sites over in modern-day Iraq and Iran. But here's the big twist. In Mesopotamia, specific signs, like a commonly used Indus jar symbol, were actually repeated twice in a row. That is a pattern that was never, ever found in the Indus Valley itself. This proves the Mesopotamians actually adapted the Indus symbols to write their own foreign language. So it confirms a vast, highly active trade network between these ancient superpowers. Okay, Section 4, a civilization without war. Honestly, what's missing from these excavated ruins completely changes everything we assume about early human history. Think about your typical Bronze Age civilizations. When you look at places like Egypt or Mesopotamia, you're going to find grand temples, opulent palaces, royal tombs, massive armies, and lots of weapons. But the Indus Valley? They shockingly lacked all of that. There are no identifiable religious sites, absolutely no evidence of monarchs or a rigid ruling class, and most amazingly, no weapons of war. None at all. It really appears that this was a massive, egalitarian society that thrived for millennia in unprecedented peace. They just lived happily and without any strict social hierarchy. It's like they had no natural human enemies to build defenses against. Instead of conquest and war, they focused entirely on engineering, trade, hygiene, and public well-being. It's pretty amazing. But that brings us to Section 5, Theories of the Decline, because somewhere between 1900 BC and 1300 BC, this utopian network just rapidly collapsed. The meticulously planned sewers decayed, that magnificent Great Bath filled with everyday waste, trade links were completely severed, and the cities were mysteriously abandoned. So, experts have impartially weighed a bunch of proposed theories for this catastrophic collapse. Some point to a geological shift, like massive earthquakes rapidly altering the landscape and causing terrible floods. Others argue for severe drought, suggesting the vital Saraswati River simply dried up. Then you have theories about fatal disease outbreaks, like cholera wiping out the dense cities, or that they basically caused their own ruin through deforestation by clearing entire forests just to bake all those millions of standardized bricks. There's even a highly speculative, though heavily debated theory out there, linking abnormal radiation found in some skeletons to an ancient nuclear event, given the proximity to the Mahabharata epics Kurukshetra. But the crucial point actually comes from recent, hard data. Specifically, offshore sediment core data drilled right from the bottom of the Arabian Sea. This points to a purely environmental culprit. It strongly suggests they were what we call a Goldilocks civilization, basically the beneficiaries of a highly favorable, perfectly balanced, but ultimately temporary climate window. And this data brilliantly illustrates exactly how that climate shifted. The cores showed that the heavy summer monsoons, which their massive river agriculture absolutely relied on, severely decreased. And at the exact same time, winter monsoons increased significantly further east in the Himalayan foothills. This essentially created an environmental pull, forcing the population away from the dying rivers to migrate and chase those new winter rains. The aftermath is honestly tragic. Stripped of the mighty rivers that fed their sprawling cities, the survivors really had no choice. They had to abandon their urban lifestyle entirely. In a huge historical regression, they forgot their advanced city planning, they completely lost their written language, and they essentially returned to basic rain-fed subsistence farming for another 1,000 years. It leaves us with a really haunting realization about the profound fragility of even the most sophisticated empires. A peaceful, incredibly advanced society of 5 million people simply faded into the dust when the climate turned against them. It makes you look down at the ground and wonder, if a society this massive can just disappear, what other ancient secrets are still buried right beneath our feet, just waiting to be unearthed?